I found my son sleeping in his car at the airport parking lot. Two babies bundled in blankets beside him, his face pressed against cold glass. When I tapped the window, he jolted awake like a man who'd forgotten what safety felt like. His eyes were hollow, red, like he hadn't slept in weeks. I said, "Where's the $150,000 I gave you?" He looked at me, and his whole body just collapsed. "Dad," he whispered, "my wife, her family, they took everything. They're saying I'm crazy. They're trying to take my kids." That's when I knew this wasn't just about money. This was war. My name is Marcus Isaiah Thompson. I'm 65 years old. At the time this all started, I was living in a quiet neighborhood in Silver Spring, Maryland, working as a senior logistics manager at a shipping company. I'd been divorced for 12 years, raised two sons on my own, thought I'd done everything right. Thought I'd given them the tools to build something better than what I had. But that cold November morning in 2019, standing in that parking lot with my son broken in front of me, I realized I didn't know my own child's life at all. And what I was about to uncover would shake everything I believed about family, love, and what people are capable of when they think no one's watching. Before we get into this, I need to know something. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment. Let me know you're out there. Because what I'm about to tell you, I need to know I'm not alone in feeling this kind of pain. It started 3 years earlier. My son Terrence was 2 years old. Brilliant kid. Always had been. Graduated from Howard University with honors, degree in computer science. Worked at a tech firm in D.C. for a few years, but he always had this itch. He wanted to build something of his own. I remember sitting in my living room one Sunday after church, and he pulled out this notebook. Pages and pages of ideas, sketches, business plans. He said, "Dad, I want to create an app that helps small Black-owned businesses get funding. A platform where they can pitch directly to investors without all the gatekeeping." His eyes were on fire. I hadn't seen him that alive since he was a kid building robots out of cardboard boxes. I believed in him. Maybe too much. But isn't that what a father's supposed to do? Believe? So when he asked me for $150,000 to get his startup off the ground, I didn't hesitate. I'd been saving for years. That money was supposed to be for my retirement. Maybe a little cabin somewhere near the water. But what's the point of having money if you can't help your children reach higher than you ever did? I wrote the check. He cried when I handed it to him. He said, "Dad, I swear I'm going to make you proud." I hugged him. I said, "You already do, son. Now go build something beautiful." I can still feel the weight of that moment. The hope in his eyes. The promise in his voice. Things moved fast after that. Terrence quit his job. Rented a small office space in College Park. Hired 2 developers. Started working 16-hour days. I didn't see him much, but when I did, he looked happy. Tired but happy. Then he met her. Simone. She was 28. Worked in marketing. Pretty girl. Smile that could light up a room. She came to a family cookout I threw that summer, and I watched her work the crowd. Charming. Confident. She had this way of making everyone feel like they mattered. My younger son, Darnell, pulled me aside and said, "She's smooth, Dad." too smooth. I laughed it off. I thought he was just being protective. I wish I'd listened. 6 months later, Terrence told me they were engaged. I was surprised. It felt fast, but he was glowing. He said, "Dad, she believes in me. She gets the vision." I met her parents once. Her father, Robert, was a real estate broker, drove a Mercedes, talked loud. Her mother, Diane, was quieter but had this look in her eyes like she was always calculating something. They lived in a big house in Potomac, old money vibes. I remember thinking, these people are out of our league. But I pushed that thought away. I told myself love doesn't care about tax brackets. I shook Robert's hand. I smiled at Diane. I said, "Welcome to the family." I didn't know I was shaking hands with the people who would destroy my son. By the time the wedding rolled around, I'd barely seen Terrence. He was always busy. The startup was growing. Simone had moved in with him. They had a small ceremony, nothing fancy. I gave a toast. I said, "To my son, who taught me that dreaming isn't just for the young, and to Simone, who I trust will stand by him no matter what." She smiled at me, raised her glass. But I swear, just for a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Something cold. I told myself I was imagining things. But that flicker, it was the first crack. And I didn't even know the wall was about to come down. The twins were born 14 months after the wedding. A boy and a girl. Isaiah and Amara. Terrence called me from the hospital, voice shaking. He said, "Dad, I'm a father. Can you believe it?" I drove to the hospital that night. Held those babies in my arms. Isaiah had my eyes. Amara had Terrence's nose. I looked at my son, and I saw the man I'd raised. Strong, loving, ready to give everything for his family. I said, "You're going to be a great dad." He nodded. But I noticed something. Simone wasn't in the room. The nurse said she was resting. But when I went to check on her, I heard voices. Her mother was there. And they were arguing. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sharp. I knocked. The voices stopped. Simone smiled when I walked in, but it didn't reach her eyes. Over the next few months, I started noticing things. Terrence stopped coming by as much. When I called, he sounded distracted, stressed. I asked how the business was going. He said, "It's good, Dad. Just a lot of moving parts." I offered to help. He said he had it under control, but I could hear it in his voice. He didn't have it under control. I drove to his house one afternoon unannounced. The lawn was overgrown. Mail piled up by the door. I knocked. Simone answered. Hair tied up. No makeup. She looked tired. I asked where Terrence was. She said, "At the office. Always at the office." There was bitterness in her voice. I asked if everything was okay. She smiled, said, "Everything's fine, Marcus." But her hand was shaking when she closed the door. I called Terrence that night, told him I was worried. He sighed. He said, "Dad, it's just hard right now. The app isn't growing as fast as we projected. Investors are pulling out. And Simone? She's not handling the stress well." I asked what he meant. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She's been staying at her parents' house a lot. Says she needs help with the babies. But when I go over there, her dad, he talks to me like I'm a failure." My chest tightened. I said, "You're not a failure, son. You're building something from nothing. That takes time." He said, "I know, Dad, but time costs money, and we're running out of both." I heard him take a deep breath. I heard the weight he was carrying. 2 weeks later, Terrence showed up at my house in the middle of the night. He looked like hell. Eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. He said, "Dad, I think I made a mistake." I sat him down, made him tea. He told me Simone wanted him to shut down the business. Her father had offered him a job at his firm, sales position, steady income. Terrence said, "But if I take it, everything we built, it's over." I asked what he wanted to do. He looked at me. He said, "I want to keep fighting, but I don't know if I can do it alone." I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, "You're not alone. I'm right here." He hugged me, and for the first time since he was a boy, I felt him cry on my shoulder. But here's the thing I didn't know. While Terrence was sitting in my living room trying to hold his life together, Simone was at her parents' house signing documents. Documents that would transfer the business accounts into her name. Documents that listed Terrence as mentally unstable. Documents that would give her family control of everything my son had built. And I didn't find out about any of it until it was too late. If you've ever been lied to by someone you loved, you might feel this one. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just gotten off a late shift. My phone rang at 11 p.m. It was Darnell. He said, "Dad, you need to come to the hospital." Now, my heart dropped. I said, "What happened? Is it Terrence?" He said, "Just come." I drove faster than I should have. My mind was spinning. When I got to the ER, Darnell was in the waiting room. His face was tight. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Terrence tried to hurt himself." The world tilted. I grabbed the wall. I said, "What do you mean he tried to hurt himself?" Darnell's voice cracked. He said, "He took pills, Dad. A lot of them. Simone found him and called 911. They let me see him an hour later. He was in a bed, hooked up to machines. His face was pale, eyes closed. I sat beside him, held his hand. I said, "What happened, son? What happened?" He didn't wake up until the next morning. When he did, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Dad." I said, "Sorry for what?" He said, "For being weak." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him he wasn't weak, that the world had beaten him down, that none of this was his fault. But before I could say anything, Simone walked in. She had her mother with her. She looked at me and said, "Marcus, we need to talk." The way she said it, cold, like she was reading from a script. We went into the hallway. Simone folded her arms. She said, "Terrence isn't well. He hasn't been for months. He's been paranoid, erratic. We think he needs professional help." I said, "What are you talking about?" "He's stressed. The business is struggling." That's not the same as being mentally ill. Her mother stepped forward. She said, "Marcus, denial won't help him. He needs treatment. We've already contacted a facility." I felt my blood go cold. I said, You're not putting my son in a facility. Simone's face hardened. She said, I'm his wife. I have power of attorney. And if you try to interfere, I'll make sure you never see those babies again. Her words hit me like a punch. I wanted to hit something. I wanted to shout. But I kept my voice steady. I said, Where are Isaiah and Amara? Simone said, They're safe, with my parents. I said, I want to see them. She said, Not right now. I stepped closer. I said, Those are my grandchildren. Her mother put a hand on my chest. She said, Back off, Marcus, you're making a scene. I looked at Simone. I said, What did you do? She didn't answer. She just turned and walked away. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about Terrence's health. This was about control. This was about money. And they were going to take everything. Terrence was released 3 days later. But he didn't come home with me. He went to Simone's parents' house. I called him every day. Most of the time he didn't answer. When he did, he sounded defeated. He said, Dad, I don't know what's real anymore. They keep saying I'm sick. Maybe they're right. I said, You're not sick, son. You're being manipulated. He said, I don't have the strength to fight anymore. That's when I realized I had to step in, because if I didn't, I was going to lose him forever. I thought I had time. Turns out, time had me. 2 months passed. I barely heard from Terrence. Every time I called, Simone answered. She said he was resting. She said he needed space. She said I was making things worse by stressing him out. I tried to visit. The gate to her parents' property was always locked. I left messages. No one called back. I felt like I was losing my mind. Darnell told me to get a lawyer. I said, A lawyer for what? He's an adult. I can't force him to leave. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. Every morning I woke up with this knot in my stomach. Every night I went to bed feeling like I'd failed. Then, one day, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a law firm in Bethesda. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a cease and desist order. It said I was harassing Simone and her family. It said if I continued to contact them, they would file for a restraining order. I read it 3 times. I couldn't believe it. I called the number on the letterhead. A woman answered. I said, I'm Marcus Thompson. I just received a letter from your office. I need to speak to someone about this. She put me on hold. A man came on. He said, Mr. Bleak. Thompson, my client has made it very clear. You are not to contact her or her family. If you do, we will take legal action. I said, I'm trying to see my son. I'm trying to see my grandchildren. He said, Your son is under the care of his wife. If you have concerns, you can file a petition with the court, but until then, stay away. I hung up. I sat in my living room in silence. I felt powerless. I felt like a ghost in my own son's life. I thought about all the times I'd sacrificed for him, all the late nights, all the extra shifts, all the love I'd poured into raising him. And now, some stranger on the phone was telling me I couldn't even check on him. I cried that night. Not just tears. I broke down. I cried like a man who'd lost everything, because in a way, I had. The walls of my house felt like they were closing in. The air felt thick. I couldn't breathe. A week later, I got another letter. This one was worse. It was a notice that Terrence's business had been dissolved. The assets had been liquidated. The funds had been transferred to an account under Simone's name. My $150,000 was gone. 3 years of my son's work was gone. I called my bank. I called a lawyer. They all said the same thing. If Simone had legal power of attorney and Terrence had signed documents, there was nothing I could do. I said, but he wasn't in his right mind. They manipulated him. The lawyer said, proving that in court is almost impossible. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to scream. But all I could do was sit there and stare at that letter. I didn't sleep for days. I kept thinking about Terrence's face the last time I saw him. The emptiness in his eyes. The way he said, maybe they're right. I kept thinking about those babies. My grandbabies. Growing up in a house full of lies, I kept thinking about Simone's cold smile, her mother's calculating stare, her father's loud, condescending voice. And I realized something. This wasn't just about taking Terrence's money. This was about breaking him, about erasing him, about making sure he had nothing left to fight with, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I didn't tell anyone this until now. It was 6 a.m. on a Sunday. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to pick up. A woman's voice said, "Is this Marcus Thompson?" I said, "Yes." "Who's this?" she said. "My name is Angela. I used to work for Robert Whitfield, Simone's father." My heart started pounding. I said, "What do you want?" She said, "I need to meet with you. There's something you need to know about what they're doing to your son." Her voice was urgent, scared almost. I said, "When?" She said, "Today, as soon as you can." I got dressed, drove to the diner she told me about. We met at a place in Rockville. Angela was in her 40s. Sharp eyes, nervous energy. She ordered coffee but didn't drink it. She said, "I worked as Robert's assistant for 3 years. I quit 2 months ago because I couldn't be part of what they were doing anymore." I said, "What are they doing?" She leaned forward. She said, "They've been planning this since the day Simone met Terrence. Robert has a history of this. He finds men with potential, has his daughter marry them. Then they drain them dry. They did it to Simone's first husband. He's living in a trailer park in West Virginia now, broke, alone. And they're doing the same thing to your son." My stomach turned. I felt sick. I said, "Why are you telling me this?" She said, "Because I have kids. And if someone did this to my child, I'd want to know." She pulled out a folder. Inside were bank statements, emails, text messages. She said, "Simone transferred all the business funds into an offshore account. Robert helped her set it up. They're planning to sell the intellectual property of Terrence's app. They've already got a buyer lined up." I said, "But the business is in Terrence's name." She shook her head. She said, "Not anymore. They had him sign papers while he was on medication. papers that transferred ownership. He doesn't even know. Her hands were shaking as she pushed the folder toward me. I looked at the documents. My hands were shaking too. I said, "How do I stop this?" Angela said, "You need a good lawyer, and you need to move fast. Once that IP is sold, it's over." She slid the folder across the table. She said, "I made copies. Use them. But keep my name out of it. I can't afford to get dragged into court." I said, "Why are you helping me?" She looked down at her coffee. She said, "Because I should have spoken up sooner. I should have said something when I saw what they did to the last guy. But I didn't. And I've had to live with that. So now I'm saying something. Don't let them win." She got up, left cash on the table, and walked out. I sat there staring at that folder for a long time. I left that diner with a folder full of evidence and a fire in my chest. I drove straight to a lawyer's office, the best one I could afford. A woman named Lydia Chen. She looked through the documents. She said, "This is bad, but it's also gold. If we can prove your son was coerced while mentally impaired, we can challenge the transfers. But we'll need Terrence to testify. And from what you've told me, he's not in a place to do that." I said, "Then I'll get him there." She said, "Mr. Thompson, you need to understand. This is going to be ugly. They're going to fight back. Hard." I said, "Let them. I'm not backing down." That night, I called Darnell. I told him everything. He said, "Dad, what are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to get your brother back, and then we're going to burn their whole operation to the ground." I know it sounds crazy, but I started following Simone, not because I wanted to, because I had to. Lydia said we needed proof that Terrence was being isolated, that he was being controlled. So I parked outside her parents' house, watched, waited, took notes. I felt like a criminal, but what else was I supposed to do? Sit at home and hope my son magically got better? I sat in my car for hours. The cold seeped through the windows. My breath fogged up the glass. I felt like a stranger in my own life. One night, I saw Terrence. He came out of the house around 10 p.m., walked to the mailbox. He looked thin, gaunt. His shoulders were slumped. I wanted to get out of the car, run to him, grab him, tell him everything. But I couldn't. If they saw me, they'd call the cops. So I just watched. He stood there for a long time, staring at the sky, like he was trying to remember something. Then Simone came out. She grabbed his arm, pulled him back inside. The door slammed shut, and I sat there in the dark, crying like a coward. I hit the steering wheel. I screamed, but no one heard me. A few days later, I followed Simone to a law office in downtown D.C. She was there for 2 hours. When she came out, she was with a man in a suit. They were laughing. I took pictures, sent them to Lydia. She ran his name. Turned out he was a patent attorney. Lydia said, "They're setting up the sale. We need to file an injunction. Now." We filed the paperwork that afternoon. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. Lydia said, "This could take months, and they're going to fight every step of the way." I said, "I don't care how long it takes. We're not letting them win." The next week, I got a call from Terrence. His voice was shaky. He said, "Dad, what did you do?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Simone's lawyer called. They said you're trying to take the kids from her. They said you're claiming I'm unfit." "Dad, why would you do that?" My stomach dropped. I said, "Son, that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to help you." He said, "Help me? You're making everything worse. Just leave me alone." He hung up. I tried calling back. He didn't answer. I called 10 times. 20 times. Nothing. Nothing. Just silence. I felt like I was losing him. Like every move I made pushed him further away. But I couldn't stop. Because if I stopped, they won. And I couldn't let them win. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights off. I thought about quitting. I thought about walking away. But then I thought about those babies, Isaiah and Amara, growing up without knowing their grandfather, growing up thinking their father was crazy. And I knew I couldn't quit. Not now. Not ever. We went to court 3 months later. It was a small hearing, just to get a temporary injunction on the sale of the intellectual property. Terrence was there. He sat with Simone. Didn't look at me once. My chest ached. Lydia presented the evidence, the bank statements, the emails, the testimony from Angela, who agreed to speak anonymously. The judge listened. Simone's lawyer argued that Terrence had willingly signed everything, that he was a grown man making his own decisions, that I was a bitter old man trying to control my son's life. Every word felt like a knife. The judge looked at me. She said, "Mr. Thompson, do you have any direct evidence that your son was coerced?" I said, "Your Honor, my son tried to take his own life. He was on medication. He wasn't in his right mind." She said, "But do you have medical records? Psychiatric evaluations?" I said, "They won't let me see them." She said, "Then I can't rule in your favor based on speculation." She denied the injunction. Simone's lawyer smirked. Simone squeezed Terrence's hand, and I felt like the earth had opened up beneath me. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to tell that judge everything, but I couldn't, because the system wasn't built for people like me. As we left the courtroom, I tried to approach Terrence. He looked at me. His eyes were empty. He said, "Dad, I need you to stop." I said, "Terrence, please, just listen to me. They're using you." He shook his head. He said, "You don't get it. I chose this." Dial, dial. Dial, 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 dial. Simone wrapped her arm around him. She looked at me. She smiled. And I swear, in that moment, I wanted to destroy her. I wanted to tear her apart with my bare hands. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching my son walk away from me. I walked out of that courthouse feeling like I'd lost my son forever. Darnell put his arm around me. He said, "What now, Dad?" I said, "I don't know." But deep down, I knew. I wasn't giving up. Not yet. Lydia caught up with us in the parking lot. She said, "We need to regroup. Find another angle. There has to be something we're missing." I said, "What if there isn't?" She said, "Then we make something. We fight until we can't fight anymore." I looked at her. I said, "Why are you doing this? You could walk away. Take another case. Make more money." She said, "Because some cases aren't about money. They're about what's right." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the courtroom scene in my head. Terrence's empty eyes. Simone's cold smile. The judge's dismissive tone. I felt like I was drowning. Like the weight of everything was pulling me under. But then I thought about Angela. About how she'd risked everything to help me. About how she'd said, "Don't let them win." And I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for Terrence. I was fighting for every person who'd ever been manipulated. Every person who'd ever been silenced. Every person who'd ever been told they didn't matter. And I wasn't going to stop. 6 months later, I got a call from an unknown number. A man's voice said, "Mr. Thompson, you don't know me, but I think you should come to Dulles Airport. Parking lot C. Your son is here." I said, "What? Why?" He said, "Just come. He needs you." The line went dead. My heart was racing. I didn't know what I was walking into. I grabbed my keys, drove to the airport. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I kept thinking, is this a trap? Is this real? But I had to go. I had to see. I drove to the airport. My heart was in my throat. I didn't know what I was walking into. I found parking lot C, and that's when I saw it. Terrence's car. Windows fogged up. I walked over. Tapped on the glass. He jolted awake. His face was hollow. His eyes were red. And in the back seat, bundled in blankets, were Isaiah and Amara. They were sleeping. My heart broke. I opened the door. The smell hit me. Sweat. Fear. Desperation. I said, "Terrence, what's going on?" He looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw my son. Not the empty shell, but my son. He said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I said, "Sorry for what?" He started crying. He said, "They took everything. The business, the money, the house, and now they're trying to take my kids. They filed papers saying I'm mentally unstable. They want full custody. I have nothing left." I knelt down beside the car. I said, "Where's the $150,000 I gave you?" He broke down. He said, "It's gone, Dad." Simone and her family took it all. They said I signed it away. But I don't even remember. I don't remember anything from those months. They had me on so many pills. I couldn't think. I couldn't fight. And now they're saying I'm crazy. His whole body was shaking. I grabbed his face. I said, "Listen to me. You're not crazy. You were manipulated. And we're going to fix this." He said, "How?" "I have nothing." I said, "You have me. Now pack your things. We're leaving. Right now." He looked at the babies. He said, "What if they come after me? What if they take them?" I said, "Let them try. I'm not letting you go through this alone anymore." I helped him gather their things. Blankets. Diapers. A few toys. We loaded everything into my car. The babies woke up. Amara looked at me with big brown eyes. Isaiah reached for me. And in that moment, I knew. This was my second chance. We drove back to my house in silence. Terrence stared out the window. I kept glancing at him, wondering what he was thinking, wondering if I'd done the right thing. When we got home, I set up the spare room for him and the babies. I made them food. I gave them clean clothes. And for the first time in months, I saw Terrence smile. It was small. Fragile. But it was there. He said, "Thank you, Dad." I said, "You don't have to thank me. This is what family does." That night, I held Isaiah and Amara while Terrence slept, and I made a promise. I was going to protect them, no matter what it took. I took Terrence and the babies to my house. We didn't tell anyone where we were. Lydia said it was risky, that Simone could claim kidnapping. But I didn't care anymore. My son was falling apart, and those babies needed stability. We set up a plan. Terrence agreed to get a psychiatric evaluation from an independent doctor. We gathered every piece of evidence we had. We filed for emergency custody, and we prepared for war. Lydia said, "This is going to get ugly. Are you ready?" I said, "I've been ready." Terrence looked at me. He said, "What if we lose?" I said, "Then we lose fighting." But we're not going down without a fight. Simone's family came at us hard. They filed police reports. They called child services. They tried to freeze my bank accounts. But we fought back. Angela agreed to testify in court. The independent psychiatrist confirmed that Terrence had been over-medicated and that his decision-making had been impaired. Lydia was relentless. She tore apart every argument Simone's lawyers made. She presented the offshore account records. She presented the forged signatures. She presented the pattern of financial abuse. The courtroom was packed. Reporters were there. It had become a story, and we were at the center of it. The final hearing was brutal. Simone sat on the stand and lied. She said Terrence was violent, that he threatened her, that he was an unfit father. But then Angela took the stand. She laid out everything: the offshore accounts, the forged signatures, the pattern of financial abuse, the plan to sell the intellectual property. She said, "Robert Whitfield has done this before, and he'll do it again if no one stops him." The courtroom went silent. Simone's father turned red. Her lawyer tried to object, but it was too late. The truth was out. You could feel it in the air. The shift. The judge called a recess. We waited in the hallway. Terrence was shaking. I held his hand. I said, "No matter what happens, we did the right thing." He said, "I'm scared, Dad." I said, "Me too, son. Me too." When we went back in, the judge looked at Simone. She looked at Robert. She looked at Terrence. And then she spoke. She said, "Based on the evidence presented, I am ruling in favor of Mr. Thompson. Full custody of the children will be granted to him. Mrs. Thompson is ordered to return all illegally transferred funds. And Mr. Robert Whitfield will be investigated for financial fraud." The courtroom erupted. Simone screamed. Her father stood up. But it was over. We'd won. We walked out of that courthouse into the sunlight. Terrence was crying. Darnell was crying. I was crying. Lydia shook my hand. She said, "You did it." I said we did it. Terrence hugged me. He said, "I don't know how to thank you." I said, "You don't have to. You're my son. I'd go to war for you 1,000 times over." We drove home. The babies were with us. Safe, protected, loved. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. That was the day I realized peace don't come cheap. It's been 2 years now. Terrence lives with me. We're raising Isaiah and Amara together. He's working again, slowly rebuilding. He got a job at a tech company. Nothing fancy, but it's honest work. And he's happy. The kids are thriving. Isaiah just started preschool. Amara loves to dance. They call me Papa, and every time they say it, my heart swells. Terrence is not the same man he was before, but he's stronger, wiser, and he's here. That's what matters. We have dinner together every night. We talk. We laugh. We heal. We don't talk about Simone much. She's out of our lives. Her father lost his business. The investigation uncovered years of fraud. He's facing charges. Her mother stopped calling. Some battles you win, some you just survive. This one, we survived, and then we won. Simone tried to reach out once. B left a message saying she wanted to see the kids. Terrence deleted it without listening to the whole thing. He said, "Some doors need to stay closed, Dad." I nodded. I understood. Forgiveness is complicated. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away and never look back. The money? We got some of it back. Not all of it. The offshore accounts were complicated. Lawyers took their cut. By the time everything was settled, we recovered about $60,000. It wasn't the full $150,000 I'd given Terrence, but it was something. Terrence wanted to give it all back to me. I said, "Keep it. Start a college fund for the babies." That's what this was always about. Building something better. He cried when I said that. He's cried a lot these past 2 years, but they're different tears now. Healing tears, not the desperate, broken kind. The kind that wash away old pain and make room for something new. I look at my grandbabies every morning. I watch them run around my backyard. I hear them laugh. Isaiah has this infectious giggle that makes everyone around him smile. Amara sings made-up songs while she colors. And I think about how close we came to losing everything. How close Terrence came to being erased. But we didn't let it happen. We fought. And we won. Some nights I sit on my porch and I think about that parking lot. That cold November morning. My son's hollow eyes. Those babies bundled in blankets. And I think about how one phone call changed everything. How one stranger's courage gave us a fighting chance. Darnell comes by every Sunday. We have family dinners. He brings his girlfriend now. She's good with the kids. Makes them laugh. Terrence is starting to date again. Slowly. Carefully. He's learning to trust again. Learning to believe that not everyone is out to hurt him. It's a process. Some days are harder than others.
But he's doing the work, going to therapy.
Talking about what happened. facing the shame and the guilt and the anger. And every day, he gets a little bit stronger. Every day, he looks a little more like the son I raised. The one with fire in his eyes and dreams in his heart. We still see Lydia sometimes. She calls to check on us. Sends birthday cards to the kids. She became more than a lawyer. She became family. That's what happens when you fight alongside someone. When you stand in the trenches together, you don't forget. Angela sent a letter last year. She'd moved to North Carolina. Started her own business. She said, "Thank you for giving me the courage to do the right thing. Your fight inspired me to stand up for myself too." I wrote her back. Told her she saved my son's life. Told her she was a hero. Because she was. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they're just ordinary people who decide that silence costs too much. If you've made it this far, I want you to know something. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, if you've ever felt powerless, if you've ever watched someone you care about get torn apart by people who were supposed to protect them, you're not alone. And you don't have to stay silent. I spent months feeling like I was losing my mind, like I was fighting ghosts, like every step forward pushed me 2 steps back, but I kept going. Because love doesn't quit. Real love doesn't walk away when things get hard. Real love fights. Real love shows up in parking lots at dawn. Real love sits in courtrooms and faces down liars. Real love sacrifices retirement funds and peace of mind and comfortable silences. I learned something through all of this. I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who stands beside you when the world is falling apart. It's about who risks everything to tell you the truth. Angela wasn't family by blood, but she became family through courage. Lydia wasn't family by blood, but she became family through loyalty. And Darnell? He showed me what it means to be a brother, to stand by your father even when the fight seems impossible, to believe even when hope feels like a luxury you can't afford. Terrence tells the kids about what happened. Not all of it. They're too young for the full story. But he tells them that sometimes people make mistakes. That sometimes people get lost. But family never stops looking. Family never stops fighting. Family never gives up. Isaiah asked me last week, "Papa, were you scared?" I said, "Every single day, buddy. Every single day." He said, "But you did it anyway?" I said, "Yeah, I did it anyway. Because you and your sister and your daddy, you're worth every bit of scared I ever felt." I'm 67 now, 2 years older than when this all started, 2 years wiser, 2 years more grateful. I wake up every morning and I hear little feet running down the hallway. I hear, "Papa, Papa, wake up!" And I smile. Because I almost lost this. I almost lost them. But I didn't. And every day I get with these kids, every meal I share with my sons, every laugh and every tear, and every ordinary moment, that's my victory. That's what I fought for. Not money, not revenge. Just this. Just family. Just love. Just the chance to be present in their lives. So here's what I need from you. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own battles, if it made you think about someone you love who needs you to fight for them, do something for me. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Because these stories, they matter. Your story matters, and I'm here to remind you that you're not alone in this fight. Whatever you're facing, whatever mountain you're climbing, whatever battle is breaking your heart, keep going. Keep fighting. Keep believing that peace is possible. Don't just watch. Comment where you're watching from. It matters. Because when we share our stories, when we connect across distances and differences, we remind each other that we're human, that we're fragile, that we're strong, that we're capable of surviving things that should have destroyed us, and that on the other side of survival there's something beautiful waiting. Maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's scarred and complicated and messy. But it's yours, and it's real, and it's worth every fight. My name is Marcus Isaiah Thompson. I'm 67 years old. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, with my son Terrence and my grandbabies Isaiah and Amara. I spent $150,000 trying to help my son build a dream. I lost most of it, but I gained something more valuable. I gained the knowledge that when it mattered most, I didn't back down. I didn't walk away. I showed up. I fought. And I won the only thing that ever really mattered: my family. I didn't tell anyone this until now, but I'm telling you because maybe you need to hear it. Maybe someone you love needs to hear it. Peace don't come cheap. It costs everything. Your comfort, your pride, your money, your certainty. Sometimes it costs your relationships with people you thought you knew. Sometimes it costs your faith in humanity. But on the other side of that cost, there's something waiting. Something worth every sacrifice. And that something is the chance to look in the mirror and know you did everything you could. That you loved as hard as you could. That you fought as long as you could. And that when it was all over, you were still standing. So wherever you are right now, whatever you're facing, whatever pain you're carrying, I see you. I honor you. And I'm telling you from experience, don't give up. The parking lot moment is coming. The moment where everything changes. The moment where you have to decide if you're going to pack up and fix it or walk away. And when that moment comes, pack up, fix it. Fight for what matters. Fight for who matters. Because at the end of your life, nobody's going to remember how much money you made or how comfortable you kept yourself. They're going to remember whether you showed up, whether you fought. I'm still standing. Terrence is still standing. Isaiah and Amara are thriving. And every single morning when I wake up in this house full of noise and love and second chances, I thank God that I didn't quit, that I didn't listen to the voices that said it was hopeless, that I didn't believe the lies that said I was too old, too powerless, too late, because I wasn't, and neither are you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about an old man's story about love and loss and fighting like hell for what matters. Drop that comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've got someone worth fighting for. Tell me if this story reminded you that you're not alone. Because that's why I'm here. That's why I'm sharing this. Not for fame. Not for attention. but because silence protects the people who hurt us. And speaking up protects the people we love. My name is Marcus Isaiah Thompson, and I'm still standing. Peace don't come cheap, but I promise you, it's worth every penny you'll ever pay.